I am going to take some questions now. And I'm hoping that you will come up with some ones that you really would like answers for. So what do you got for me? Coach Amy says, do you think the sexual attraction for a covert narcissist is only due to trauma? So Amy, I highly suggest that you read my Human Magnet Syndrome book, because that will explain everything I'm about to explain in much more detail. The Human Magnet Syndrome represents chemistry, that unconscious gut level feeling of compatibility, excitement. When there is good chemistry, there is this intense attraction. When the chemistry is not there, there's anything from a neutral feeling like, hey, they're great, but, or to like, ew, or like, this is not for me. So that chemistry comes from what I call is a relationship template. And I use that term repeatedly in my work, especially my Human Magnet Syndrome book. The way we are raised in our family during what we know as the attachment period of our childhood, when we are most susceptible to the tragedy of neglect, abuse, deprivation, abandonment. If we are loved unconditionally, just by regular parents, there's no such thing as perfect parents, and we are loved for who we are, we will develop this feeling of safety, this feeling like we are good just because we are. If we have a narcissistic parent with a personality disorder, we are going to not get that unconditional love, and we are going to feel essentially unlovable, broken, not good enough, and we'll have to figure out a way to make ourselves be the preferred child, the loved child, the safe child, the trophy child, the golden child. And so we mold ourselves in order to get the conditional love from the narcissistic parent. And that there's many ways that happens. That whole process is called the attachment process. So if you have an attachment experience with pathologically narcissistic parent and a codependent parent, you're going to come out of it feeling core shame and loneliness, and that you're only as good as what you do or what you don't do, or what you can be that is different from your true identity yourself. And that is crystallized into your personality. That is your relationship template. Incidentally, if you have loving parents, again, not perfect, but loving, unconditionally loving, you come out of your childhood with a relationship template is that you are lovable, you are good, you don't have to be anyone else other than yourself. And that is your relationship template. So when a person becomes an adult and they get involved in intimate romantic relationships, there is this chemistry experience. The chemistry is the matching of opposite relationship templates. The relationship template for a person who is codependent, or what I call self-love deficient, an SLD, they naturally feel better, safer in a familiar environment where they are the caretaker, they sacrifice, they listen without saying what they want. And the narcissist, their relationship template is they naturally feel safer, more familiar in an environment where they want something and they take it and someone wants to give it to them. So when the narcissist and the SLD or the codependent meet on a date, there is this intense attraction. It's because of the opposite relationship templates. And that goes all the way back to trauma. Trauma creates the relationship templates that are responsible for adult self-love deficit disorder, codependency, and adult pathological narcissism, which could be narcissistic personality disorder. So that is why the resolution of this codependency thing, or this self-love deficit disorder thing, as I call it, requires the type of treatment that has a trauma focus. And I created an 11-stage treatment program that utilizes my Healing the Inner Trauma Child trauma technique. or hitch, which incidentally, both topics are covered in detail, 4 to 6 hours on videos at my selfloverecovery.com website. And there is a 35% discount. Just scroll up on the chat and you will see the discount code. So that was the answer, Isabel. Teresa says, I stood up to my mother today and I don't know if I'll be able to get through my dad. Say, Teresa, that's the type of question that I'm suggesting people don't ask, because I can't give advice unless I know a lot about you, your mother, and your father. But I'm going to try to give you a simple answer. You say, I don't know if I'll be able to get through my dad. Well, let's assume your mother is the narcissist and your dad is the codependent. If you know you can't get through to them, that they're not going to be open to your boundary, your needs, then by pushing it, you will create conflict. And conflict will be greatly hurtful, maybe painful to you. You will either, depending on the type of SLD you are, you might, if you're an active SLD or a codependent, you'll fight and lose. If you're a passive SLD, you won't fight and lose. But if you are a fighter, then you will fight a fight that you will naturally lose. George Bernard Shaw says, don't wrestle with pigs, you'll get dirty. And besides, the pig likes it. That is in reference to don't fight or wrestle with pathological narcissists, because they love to fight and they're really good at wrestling in the mud and they will beat you every time. So the best thing to do in situations like that is don't fight. Work with a psychotherapist who understands my methods and the theories behind them, and figure out what you want to do to protect yourself without asking the impossible requests for someone who doesn't or want to or is unable to change. Amy says, how do I get comfortable with setting boundaries when you realize you've never set boundaries? It's the scariest thing as I want to recover. So Amy, you say something really fascinating that has really focused my attention over the years. I say, and it's just a black and white statement, boundaries do not work with narcissists. And should they work with a narcissist, it means the narcissist is getting something out of it or is avoiding a painful consequence. So if you believe that boundaries do not work with narcissists, then your attempt to set boundaries with people who are incapable of understanding them, complying with them, or not responding with a narcissistic injury, rage, contempt, anger, a need to punish a narcissistic injury, then you'll understand that setting a boundary with a pathological narcissist is futile. So that is why my next video, the premiere that'll be in a half an hour, is going to help you. And it's also why you should watch my YouTube video, the 3-strike boundary method, and the induced conversation videos. Because if you realize setting boundaries is futile and it won't have a positive impact, and you know that ahead of time, and you can predict, and all of this is going to be in this video today at 1, predict exactly what will happen. Because narcissists are really easy to predict if you set a boundary. The problem is a lot of SLDs or codependents don't want to predict them, and so it's like a Groundhog Day. Same thing, different scene. So if you can predict that if you set this boundary, they'll have this reaction, and that they will need to somehow beat you down intellectually through threats, intimidation, through ignorance, that you're not going to be able to get this boundary to be set, then you can see that ahead of time. Then you understand to set a boundary, you're going to either not do it and just not waste your time, or set the boundary and learn how to disconnect. And that is when my observe, don't absorb technique is most beneficial. And if you don't know about that, I have observe, don't absorb videos on YouTube, and I have a full-length seminar video available at selfloverecovery.com. So if you've never set boundaries and all of a sudden you're with a therapist that says, just set them, and they teach you how to do boundaries, they're like giving you a gun, actually a gun, and sending you in battle against people with machine guns. Now, I know that's kind of a horrible, grossly violent analogy. You don't want to fight a battle that you're going to lose. So set the boundary. Know the narcissist won't accept it. This is my 3-strike rule, which I won't go through in detail, but I suggest you watch it. And then the consequence. And after clearly repeating it 3 times, disconnect from the conversation and then follow through on the consequence. Then you have a chance that the boundary will work. See, you can't get narcissists to understand why you want the boundary and to agree with it. And it's just because they have a narcissistic personality disorder. But if you do set a consequence and you don't get sucked into what I call the wrestling ring, where you're going to lose. Remember, don't wrestle with pigs. You'll get dirty beside the pig likes it, that whole thing. Then every time they do that, you in your observe, don't absorb mode, you fulfill your consequence statement. What'll happen is they will either get tired of the consequence and comply, or that relationship will fall apart, and then there will be no reason to even have to set a boundary. Very complicated stuff. And I think I said in the beginning I wasn't going to answer it, but there you go. I did. Okay. Amy says, and that was Amy. Mary Beth says, why would a person with narcissistic personality keep me on business bank accounts? Divorce ended in 2018. Well, Mary Beth, I would have to know a whole bunch of information about this, but I will say with great confidence, it's for a reason that benefits the narcissist. Narcissists, especially if they're sociopathic, covert narcissists, or have antisocial personality disorder, they are crafty little buggers. They will do things that will make them look nice and altruistic and generous, while they're behind the scenes, they're stealing and ripping you off. So if your narcissist keeps you on a business bank account and you don't know why, first you should ask and find out what they say, because there's a chance they might tell you the truth, but understanding a lie will often lead you to a truth. But it has to do with something that's beneficial to them. Linda says, actually, it's not a question. Please, if you have a question, end it with a question mark. So ICME is a question without a question mark. I'm just teasing you, question. My therapist emphasizes that every time I say something positive about my narcissistic husband, she shoots it down as cognitive dissonance. What? What should I tell him? Is the problem good or bad? Okay, your therapist says, let me follow you, emphasizes that every time you say something positive about your husband, I assume in therapy, she shoots it down as cognitive dissonance. Well, your therapist doesn't know what she's talking about. Let's start there. Cognitive dissonance is a mental state that thoughts, feelings, or actions that you do or want to do go against your normal set of values, beliefs, what you know about yourself and what's right or wrong. And when that happens, it creates stress. You have to go into work and you hate your boss. Well, cognitive dissonance. It's like, oh man, I want to quit. You go to Best Buy and there's a 30-day return policy and you've had it 31 days. And if your morals are very strong, which would be really cool, you'll feel bad about it and have cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is internal discomfort when you know you're doing something wrong or you shouldn't be doing something. So when you're a therapist, every time you say something positive about your husband, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Basically, what I would say if you're my client, I would ask you and try to figure out how accurate of the statement. And because a lot of SLDs or codependents, they are gaslit, manipulated into believing their husband or their pathological narcissistic partner is a good person, a loving person. So I would investigate the accuracy of the statement. And let's say there is accuracy. And you say, well, my narcissistic partner takes the family on vacations and, bought me a really nice car and bought all of his kids nice iPhones or whatever. And well, that's positive. But what I would say as a therapist, I would say, let's compare the positive to the negative and figure out, and I would say, analogously, in a mathematical way, how it averages out. So if all the positives, put a value to that, to all the negatives, put a value to that, and just do this actual real math, simple math, or an analogy form of math, and see where it ends. And then you find out the positives do not compare to the negatives, and they're just breadcrumbs. And so then I would help you understand about what we call denial, which I have an acronym for it. Don't even know I am lying. Because denial, this type of denial, you don't do it on purpose. It's unconscious. It's not the type of denial where you steal a candy bar and you say, I didn't do it when everyone saw you. It happens unconsciously. I would help the client understand denial, compartmentalization, where you take all the good, and let's say of every 10 actions your narcissistic partner does, 1 is positive, real positive, and 9 are negative. Well, you raise that positive to be equal to or better than the other 9 negatives, or you just don't even think about negatives. Well, that's compartmentalization. So I would talk to you about that. Or I would investigate to see if you're gaslit, that you have been your mind has been systematically manipulated to believe something good about your husband while believing something bad about yourself that is not based in fact. So this therapist doesn't know what she's talking about, and maybe I'm wrong if you miswrote the question. And because there's so much to being right, I ask you, do not take my statement, this is indicative of a bad therapist, unless it fits, because the last thing I want to do is make a statement based upon little information. But if it fits, take the best and the rest. Linda, how do you stop them from breaking up you financially and divorce issues? Linda, that's way too general of a question. That would take more than a couple full sessions. But the short answer is learn about your problem. Buy my Human Magnet Syndrome book and study it. Information is really important. You cannot solve a problem if you do not know what it is. You cannot solve a problem if you don't know what it is. So we start there. Then understand about, hold on a second. Then understand about as much as you can. Just one second. Okay. Then understand as much as you can about you and your SLDD. And then understand the problem in itself, self-love deficit disorder, codependency, and then find a therapist. The best thing you can do is understand your problem, understand your weaknesses, understand how you're exploited by what you don't know and do know, and find a therapist that can walk you through a healing process that overcomes the foundational problems responsible for SLDD. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of people that do that. I do provide therapy, and I do provide resources for therapists to understand this and to learn and implement some of my techniques. Ellis says, a paranoid NPE, platonic friend, 66, threw me under a bus, lied to global cops. Why is that? Well, I mean, Ellis, it's because there was something in for it for him. He threw you under the bus because he wanted to escape responsibility, or he wanted to look good. That's a general question, so it's hard for me to answer that. DJ, I'm going to ask you to be to behave and be appropriate, or I'm going to remove you from this discussion. Please do that. I think that if you can do that, you might learn a little bit. All right. I'm looking for a question. Question. Oh, by the way, policemen are not only not great protectors and representatives of victims who are SLDD, but DJ, I'm not getting into this. Let it go or leave the discussion. That's the last thing I'm going to say about it. Okay. So policemen, and there are many, many good police officers, wonderful police officers. I wouldn't know what the world would be like if we didn't have them. But there are certain professions that attract personality types. Psychotherapists, coaching, they attract SLDDs or codependent types. Attorneys, plastic surgeons attract narcissist types. It's not a general rule, but if you accept that as a generalization, then you'll understand why some police officers are prone more to be supportive to the narcissist and less to the SLD. Looking for questions. Questions end with a question mark. And Ellis says, yeah, of course it could be misogyny, but think about it. People who policemen are misogynist, it could be like landscapers, therapists. It's just not policemen. But if you're a misogynist, to me, and maybe I'm stepping out a line here, if you are a racist, a misogynist, you're prejudiced based upon your own personal beliefs that are not founded in reality by facts. And that could be a form of narcissism. It's not always about it. So misogyny and narcissism are a really bad combination. Coach Amy, I am completely, she writes, what is the published date of your latest edition of your book? That was published in 2018. I spent 11 months writing the first edition. 5 years later, 11 months writing the second edition. On the third edition, I rewrote the whole book. It's going to be called A Different Book. And as you can see, as I just posted, that it should be available closer to the end of this year, December of 2023. It will be my masterpiece. I have spent 3 years rewriting everything. It will have a lot of what's in the human magnet syndrome, but will be greatly expanded. Teresa asks, how do I untangle myself from my narcissistic husband? I have no money without him. So Teresa, that's the form of the question that I ask people not to ask, because I leave people disappointed. The question really is, how do I overcome my self-love deficit disorder, which is a trauma-based disorder that was created in my childhood that has extended itself into my adult relationships, that makes me feel entrapped and vulnerable for manipulation, that makes me feel worthless, makes me feel ignored and abandoned. You need help with your self-love deficit disorder. And I provide an 11-stage comprehensive treatment program. And you can call and not call, you can write it help@selfloverecovery.com and ask more about it and ask, or you can fill out the intake form that is on our website. But that's the answer. You can't stop a problem by working on the behaviors. Like, how do I stop saying yes when I really want to say no? How do I stop being manipulated? How do I stop being bullied? Well, you can go to therapists and they'll tell you all day long what to not do and what do. But if there are stronger forces that are unconscious or conscious that are driving you to do the opposite, it will not work. Therefore, reinforcing your core shame and making it worse. So what other questions do you have before I wrap up? I know you got some questions there. Come on. What else you got there? So Ellis says, this person needs to smear women who set rational boundaries. Yes, of course, that sounds familiar. If they're pathological narcissists, that's my experience. Okay, guys, I'm going to, well, there are 2 questions, and I'm going to take these 2 questions, and then I am going to wrap it up. Ida says, can you please send the links to your research? Your work is truly transformational. Ida, without sounding trite, my research is my life. As I explained in my Human Magnet Syndrome book, there was no therapist out there that could answer my question of why I kept doing the same thing over and over again, despite wanting to do differently. And I had to create information. I had to create concepts. I had to create theories. And then I took that out on the road and for years went throughout the United States and a few places internationally training other therapists. And then I created a YouTube channel that has been around 11 years, that has a total of 27 million views, and podcasts. And I can go on and on about that's my research. Therapists don't argue with me about what I say because it resonates. People who are SLDs don't argue, narcissists do. And so that's the best research I have. I'm not a research psychologist. I would love someone to do research on my methods. I would invite it. So any aspiring psychologists or researchers out there, give me a ring. Lily, how did you fare the storm? If you are referring to me living in Florida, which I do, it hasn't hit us, and it doesn't look like it's going to come by this part of Florida. If you're referring to that, thank you very much for your thoughtful and caring words. So before I answer the last question, I want to remind you guys that at 1 o'clock, in 8 minutes, we're going to have a premiere for what I believe is one of my best videos, and it's on my worst case scenario. So stay tuned and you'll see that. Also, an exclusive for YouTube followers only, that for today, we're giving a 35% discount off of everything on a website except for direct services. You just have to use the discount code WORST, capital letters, 35, and go to selfloverecovery.com. Okay, so the last question I'm going to take is Allison's. Allison, an empath is a made-up word. The way that it's used now, it's a candy-coated word meant to make SLDs who suffer, who have shame and loneliness, who are addicted to relationships, feel good about themselves while feeling like victims. Being empathetic is a gift. It's not pathological. Having extreme empathetic qualities or gifts, being an empath, can be a gift, but sometimes it's one of those double-edged swords. Sometimes it's better not to be so empathetic. It should not be used as a description of codependency or self-love deficit disorder, because it creates a candy-coated feel-good problem that says all you're doing is something good and people are taking advantage of you. My point of view is the opposite. SLDs have to take responsibility for their problem. It is never their responsibility for being abused or hurt. Never. But it is our responsibility that we keep choosing the same person, as my therapist once said, that has a different face. Or as the same therapist said, we are a broken picker. And until we understand that the only way out of this nightmare, is to figure out what about us, what happened to us early on in our lives that created this drive, this compulsion, this feeling of familiarity with these people that hurt us. And then we have to work on that. And that is treatment for a very serious disorder. And you can't pretend you're a victim and not take responsibility if you want to solve it, which is why the term empath is really hurtful and harmful. Okay, I want to thank you guys immensely for meeting me today. I hope my questions were helpful. If you guys are inspired to do something about your own self-love deficit disorder, codependency, or you're a psychotherapist, coach, or whatever you do in the helping fields, you might find that my materials can give you a greater understanding, a blueprint of sorts on the problem, and my seminar videos, the solution. And I have a lot of 6-hour, 4-hour videos that explain the problem and the solution. You guys are wonderful. Thank you so much. And stay tuned, because in 4 minutes, we're going to have a really incredible video. Don't forget the 35% discount. Just scroll up and you'll see all the information. You guys take care.